So hello everyone, thank you for sticking around in the session to listen about my module. I'm Emma Hills, an SWW DTP funded PhD candidate here at the University of Southampton, and I'm co-supervised at the University of Exeter. I'm really excited to be here today to give you a flavour of my lifelong learning course, The Literary Legacy of the British Empire, which will be running just after Easter next year. It's a bit later than the others. Before I do though, I'll just give you a bit of an idea about my own research. In my thesis, I look at the reading and writing of 19th century British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, who you've just heard a little about from Katie's talk. And I look at his reading to try to understand how his literary activities were shaped by his imperial imagination. In my thesis and in my wider research, I'm particularly interested in the British Empire, in decolonisation, and in Victorian literature, culture, and visuality more generally. In my module, I aim to introduce you to the literature of the British Empire and give you a chance to interrogate and question the literary representation and legacy of the 19th century British imperial project. I also invite you to question the Eurocentrism of our narrative of history. We will do this through reading and analysing canonical 19th century novels with which you may be familiar, alongside some more recent fiction which might be new to you. For now, though, I want to give you a flavour of this module, the kind of texts we will study and the questions we will ask, beginning with the imperial spectacle at the Great Exhibition of 1851. The Great Exhibition was predominantly the idea of Prince Albert, along with Henry Cole and an associated commission which was set up. The aim of the exhibition was to encourage British industry and trade by showcasing manufacturing inventions, art, and craftsmanship on an international stage. A competition was organised to decide upon the design of the building. It was won by Joseph Paxton, the gardener for the Duke of Devonshire at Chatsworth, who modelled the building after a greenhouse which he had built for his employer in his gardens to house his lilies. At the time, this greenhouse was the largest glass structure in the world. The design was accepted and the magazine Punch named it the Crystal Palace, a name which many of you will recognise either from a knowledge of London or a knowledge of football, and a name which definitely stuck. The design for the building was a success due to its components being prefabricated iron and glass, which was particularly unusual at the time and was a new invention. The temporary structure was constructed in Hyde Park and was completed in just 22 weeks. It contained 900,000 square feet of glass, covered 26 acres and was a third of a mile long. That's 3 times longer than St Paul's. When it was constructed, it was not only the largest glass building in the world, but also the largest enclosed space. It was so large that they had to build over Hyde Park's elm trees, which is the reason for the domed portion of the building which runs down the centre, as you can see on the far right of the screen. Here you can see the layout of the building. It was divided into galleries where around 100,000 objects from almost 14,000 exhibitors were displayed. As the Great Exhibition of the Industry of All Nations, as it was known, the exhibition included exhibits from countries around the empire and around the world, but over half were dedicated to Britain and her empire. This building was designed to show off these thousands of objects at their absolute best, but it was a spectacle in itself. You will notice from this image that it was built in the shape of a cross, resembling a church with its north and south transepts, which you can just about see run down the middle here. This was an awe-inspiring ecclesiastical building that worshipped manufacturing, art, and industry, but which also glorified Britain's status as a global power. These images here give you an idea of just quite how grand, elaborate, and opulent it was, and how much of a spectacle. In the image at the bottom and in the image at the top right, you can see the elm trees which they had to build over. And you can also see the central fountain, which was a centerpiece of the exhibition and was made specifically for it, which was made partly as a way for people to meet each other, partly as a grand showcase of craftsmanship, as much of the exhibition was, and partly as a way of cooling the air inside. It was 26 foot tall. The picture in the top left shows Queen Victoria opening the exhibition on the 1st of May in 1851. This inauguration was attended by some 500,000 people and 25,000 season ticket holders crammed in to watch her open the event. The exhibition ran for 5.5 months and closed on the 15th of October, at which time it's seen over 6 million visitors, which was a third of Britain's population at this time. Two of those visitors you've already heard about today were Charles Dickens and Benjamin Disraeli. Introduction to the catalogue of the exhibition foregrounds the success of this event and this global power that Britain was in control of. Britain is shown to be politically and economically stable as well as physically safe, meaning that they are able to extend a hospitable invitation to all the nations of the world, and it was an invitation which was freely accepted by every civilized people, or so they say. Moreover, Britain is here positioned as being at the centre of a world and as the driving force behind technological developments. Distances are vanishing, it says, and the world is becoming smaller. The products of all quarters of the globe are placed at Britain's disposal, with the choice of which is best and cheapest left down to them for their purposes. Progress is absolutely the order of the day. The ideals of competition and capital are being extended to the wider world, and Britain is at the centre of it, with this exhibition marking a moment in that progress-driven history. They are saying, this is a showcase of where we've got to, and this is where we're going. It's all centred around us, this exhibition. We control the future. But it must also be noted that this event was inherently a display of Britain's imperial and colonial power. Not only did they display products of their colonies, which I'll show you in a moment, but the language of civilization and domination used here demonstrates that territorial expansion, which increased resources and created new markets, and the British 19th century civilizing mission were significant and important parts of Britain's idea of its own power and its ideal of progress. The fact that the products of all quarters of the globe are placed at Britain's disposal is a result of aggressive British expansion. Crucially, though, the introduction and through the galleries, which I will show you, the partaking of the colonies in the exhibition is represented as something independent and willing. So, Britain could draw the resources of the world and the eyes of the world to this one spectacular moment. As I have said, over half of the exhibits were from Britain and the Empire, and these included galleries such as this moving machinery gallery, which showcased technology from printing to metalwork and foundry machines to textile machinery. According to the British Library, it also included, quote, a steam hammer that could with equal accuracy forge the main bearing of a steamship or gently crack an egg, and adding machines which might put bank clerks out of a job, end quote. Similar galleries, like this Sheffield gallery, showcased other products of Britain's Industrial Revolution, such as these fireplaces and other ironmongery works. It is important to note here that the displays might be seen as rather muted, perhaps be thought of as sober or practical, or even diminutive in comparison to the large scale of the building itself and some of the other exhibits that I will show you in a moment. As I mentioned, there are exhibits from all around the world, including America, China, Turkey, Germany, which was still a number of states at this time, and France, one of the biggest contributors and Britain's biggest rival in trade. Some of the French exhibits can be seen here on the left, with Austria's sculpture gallery in the top right. But there were also themed galleries such as the medieval gallery shown here in the bottom right, which reflected the changing fashion and decorative trends of the mid-19th century, such as the Gothic Revival. Hopefully these images give you a good idea of the breadth and diversity of the objects on display, and also the grandeur and opulence of how they were displayed and what different countries chose to display here. There are so many images which I could show you, and it was very hard to choose just these. And on the module, we will have far more time to go into detail about what these images can tell us, what they show. But for now, I hope it's given you a flavour of what the exhibition offered. What is important to note, though, is that while the entire exhibition is excessively grand, there is a marked difference between the British and European galleries and the galleries from Britain's colonies, such as the Indian gallery, shown here. While some of these galleries are relatively similar to the European galleries in their practical display of objects, such as the boats in the top left, the display of the Raja's elephant, seen here in the centre, along with the reconstruction of an Indian tent, is distinctly Oriental. On the module, we will discuss Edward Said's conception of Orientalism. However, for now, we can see that these displays exoticize Indian culture. Whilst everything at the exhibition was displayed with commodification and objectification in mind, these galleries, and the reconstruction of the tent as a snapshot of Indian life in particular, seem to exoticize Indian culture as well as the objects themselves. India and its culture is displayed here as something owned by the British. India was at this time ruled at least partly by the British East India Company, and also as something to be bought by the spectators at the exhibition. These galleries especially are a celebration of the so-called achievements of the British imperial project at this time. So the key question is, I think, was the Great Exhibition a true representation of the British Empire? Well, the short answer is, of course it wasn't. But on the module, we'll have more time to explore this. We will look at more of the intricacies of the British Empire, and we'll ask these questions along with many others. How was the empire represented and talked about by the British throughout the 19th century? What can these representations reveal about the way Britain thought about different peoples and cultures? What isn't shown in these representations and why? And absolutely crucially, how can we understand the British Empire from a non-European stance? Why is this important? And how does it change our understanding of the British Empire and its legacy? Alongside looking at some more cultural events, we will read extracts from lots of texts with which you may be familiar, such as Jane Eyre, The Moonstone and Heart of Darkness, along with a little bit of poetry and 2 full novels, King Solomon's Mines and A God in Every Stone. We will discuss particular passages, so if you would like to sign up to the course but are worried about time constraints, don't worry at all. I will be pointing you towards particular passages through the use of a course booklet. Throughout the course, we will touch on themes such as the Empire as Other, the Scramble for Africa, imperial anxiety and the fin de siècle, the post-colonial struggle for identity, and questions around national histories and who writes them. The image of the British Empire that the Great Exhibition presented, as a celebration of a benevolent power and a thriving and welcoming community, is still sometimes the idea of the British Empire that is perpetuated today. On this course, we will learn to interrogate that idea, to think through some of the problems that it perpetuates, and to challenge it by looking at the empire from new non-European perspectives. I hope you will join me, and I look forward to meeting you in April 2022. Thank you.